In this video, I'm going to answer some questions regarding the inner child and inner parent relationship. And usually I don't read emails. I'm not going to read the entire email, but I will read portions of it because it's impossible to answer these questions without doing that. So this person was sort of responding to the video that I posted yesterday regarding connecting with the child within. And they are elaborating on kind of their situation, and that one of the things that they're struggling with is anxiety, or the things that they are struggling with are anxiety and insecurity. And they were noticing that they were spending too much effort focusing on why they were so anxious and trying to fix it. But now they're realizing that they need to soothe themselves, comfort their inner child, and express the emotions that their inner child is feeling. So that's right. Your inner child is expressing emotion. The inner parent is facilitating. So your inner child is going to express emotion kind of in a raw way. I'm mad. I'm sad. I wanted to. I don't want to. They're going to express it like that. The inner parent needs to facilitate. They need to help them to process their emotions and draw out of them what's going on. Because with a child, even sometimes they can say things in like a really superficial way. They might get mad and like kick their toy, but they're not mad at their toy. There's something else going on inside of them. And you need to find out, why did you kick the toy? What are you feeling right now? So you need a right paradigm or repertoire of what the inner parent is doing. Now, I don't want you to confuse this with bringing your child into their cognition and asking them, why do you feel that way, as though they need to cognitively process why they feel that way and intellectualize why they feel that way. So pay attention to whether you're doing that. It's one thing to acknowledge a behavior and say, why did you kick the toy? What are you feeling right now? So notice that the question is really, you kicked the toy, or it's more of a statement of you kicked the toy. What are you feeling right now that you just did that? You know, I've shared with you that when my daughter was younger, that I used to have her write out an examination of why she engaged in certain behaviors if she was in trouble. And one of the things that I would have her do is I would have her write down, what was the thing that you did? What were you feeling and what were you trying to accomplish? What could you have done instead that would have accomplished what you actually wanted inside? Now, is this a behavioral thing? No, it's getting to the feeling, because a behavioral thing would just say, what could you have done instead? But what were you trying to accomplish? What was your desire? What was your longing? What was your need? What were you feeling? That's what's going to actually give us the information for sustained change. If you're just going around punishing your kids for doing something, and no one in the house, like if they don't know, you don't know why it is that they did that, what they were feeling, what they wanted, then don't expect them to change. If you just punish them constantly, taking away their toys or belting them or whatever it is that you're doing, don't expect them to change, because they're not going to change until what's inside of them changes. So this person is now on the right track. You don't want to fix what your inner child is feeling. You want them to be able to process, because your inner child is actually very wise. We tend to treat children as though they're somehow a nuisance and they're foolish and they're unwise and they need to grow up, they need to mature. Well, why are we so messed up then? No, we went and followed the world, which says you're supposed to control everything behaviorally and cognitively. A child actually has more wisdom than the adult, because they know what they're feeling. And then we defile them by the world, telling them that the design that God gave them is incorrect. Do you see that happening in many, many ways right now at this point in the world? You're the wrong gender. God made an oopsie. We need to fix it. Your design is perfect, and God knows better than we do. So this person is on the right track by understanding that what needs to happen is that soothing. And once a child is soothed and understands why it is that they're feeling this way, they're actually quite wise. They're going to be able to come up with their own solutions. But they need you to help them. They need you to facilitate and mirror and validate and shepherd. If they know what they're feeling and they know what God requires, they're going to get there. And if they know that you are listening to them and that you're seeking these three things: to see them, know them, respond to them. See them, know them, respond to them. When you have a little infant, God is teaching you from that very time how to do this. Your little infant is screaming in the crib. You're going to pick up that baby and you're going to look at them and you're going to listen to their cry and you're going to begin to learn how to know them. Oh, this is their cry for hunger. This is their cry for being tired. This is their cry for being in pain. This is their cry for needing to be changed. You're going to start looking around. Are they drooling? Are they teething? Are they in pain? Are they wet? Are they scared? Did they wake up and see that mom wasn't there? You're going to start knowing and understanding your child. But you have to look around, and you might have to facilitate that out of them. So an older child who's now articulate or learning to be articulate, you might have to look around. And how do you look around? Verbally. You ask questions. You pay attention to when their mood is shifting. When you're talking with them and their mood shifts or they just shut down, you need to ask, what just happened to you right now? What are you feeling? You need to attune yourself to your inner child. See them. Next one is know them. You cannot possibly know your child just because you look at them. You have to know them by having a relationship with them. Even with that baby, as you're holding that baby, you are sensing their different states and how those states are shifting. You can see when your baby is content, and you can see when your baby is troubled. You can see when they're dissociating, when they're shut down, when they're connected with a parent. You can see all of those states. You can sense those states because you know on a relational level what your child's normally like, what they're like when they're content. I'm reminded years ago that someone was sharing, this was a recovering alcoholic who was sharing that feelings didn't matter and that we are a society that's too focused on feelings and all of this woo-woo stuff. And he was saying that his children who were raised when he was drinking, and there was all kinds of chaos in the home, they could go through anything and they wouldn't cry. But his children who were raised in his sobriety, whenever the parents would have a fight, they would cry. I'm sorry, but that's the most moronic thing that I've ever heard, is someone equating a child who doesn't cry to a symbol of health. And yet that's what we talk about in the world. That's actually what our culture teaches. Crying and grieving are good. You need to be connected to your feelings. For you to be totally shut down when your parents are crying to the extent that you don't cry and you don't feel is not a symbol of health. That is a quote-unquote alcoholic in the making. Someone who has to dissociate from their feelings. So have a correct repertoire of what health is. It's good for your child to feel. Do not tell your child, don't cry. When your child is able to finally cry and reach that grief and feel their feelings, now you know you're on the right track. That is a child who finally has permission to feel their feelings. So you have see them, know them, respond to them. Now in knowing them, I want to go back to that for just a minute. In knowing them, when you're having a dialogue with them, you're taking the time to know them. Roosevelt actually said something that I think is really important. He said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so it is with your inner child and your inner parent. Your inner child is not going to feel cared about or loved until you've taken the time to know them, to care about them, to care about what they're feeling, instead of neglecting and ignoring them. If you didn't have this growing up, join the club. And I want to encourage you that God can build this repertoire in you. You need to do the work. You need to keep trudging, and He will build this repertoire in you. You're not a lost cause because your parents didn't do what they were supposed to do. God has a way of healing you, and it just so happens that that is His will, because you are of no use to Him if you continue to be demonically attacked or stuck or traumatized. It's of no use to Him. He wants to heal and seal those chinks in your armor. And His intention is to activate you in the purpose for which He set you apart. So if you are bogged down in trauma, there's no way that that's going to happen. And let's say that you're not bogged down in trauma. Let's just say that you're not connected. You're not attuned. Well, if you're not attuned, you're activated in the flesh. You're not in the heart and spirit where God is. So how in the world are you going to be connected to Him? You need to be attuned to yourself. You need to be able to do this personal accountability work. And in this way, you will be personally accountable to Him. Now let's go to responding. You're having a conversation with your inner child. You're drawing out of them what it is that they're feeling. What is this connected to? Is there any are there any memories that God is bringing up inside of you? Is there anything that this is connected to in your past that needs to be resolved, healed, and sealed? Now you need to respond to your child. And there's two ways that I tell you the inner parent needs to respond to the child. One is witnessing. You're witnessing their experience. You're mirroring them. You're responding to them. And you're helping them to express their feelings. You are bearing witness to your child Think about the ways that God bears witness to us through his Holy Spirit. He doesn't tell us, let it go. He doesn't tell us, forget about that. Let's go get an ice cream. Let's go watch a show. Let's go distract ourselves. He tells us, return to me and grieve and mourn and lament. I'm with you. That's how you need to be with your inner child. You need to be with them. And when they have felt that you are with them and that they are seen and known and loved, it's going to start to resolve. Now, you want to go in this order: witnessing, then shepherding. You don't start with shepherding. Remember, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If you don't feel like someone cares about you, you are not going to take suggestion or shepherding from them whatsoever. I mean, that's super annoying, and I think all of us have been through that, where someone just jumps in and decides that they're the expert in our life, and they start telling us what to do, or they tell us, oh, I know what you're going through because I went through this. No, you don't. Even if you went through that, you don't know what I'm going through. Now, with your inner child and your inner parent, you were both there, so you do know what they're going through. So you can help them by saying things like, it was really hard. That was really hard for us to go through. And you can speak to the experience. A human being outside of you cannot do that, but you can, and it's your responsibility. So as the inner parent, you can speak to that experience and you can say, that was so hard. Tell me how you were feeling in that situation. You can remind them of different aspects of that experience. So you are interacting and you were both there. Don't start pretending and fabricating that you're doing a redo or that the inner parent wasn't there. Like, oh, that must have been really hard. I mean, that's not even authentic, is it? Well, yeah, it was really hard and you were there. Why don't you get it? You're trudging with them. So you need to fully hear your child before they're going to feel comfortable with the shepherding. They need to fully express themselves before they can transition to that next stage of you shepherding them according to God's word. This part, I think, should be self-explanatory, but let me just explain it a little bit, is you have a child who's having difficulty forgiving someone. Now you're going to help them to forgive. You're going to let them know, okay, now we need to work on forgiving. Are you ready to transition to this? God says these are the things that we need to do. Are you ready to do that? And if you're not, be honest about it and process through the feelings of, what does it look like to forgive? What is it that you feel when you think about forgiving this person? Do you feel like you're letting them off the hook? Now you're helping the child to process through the feelings of doing what God commands. Because you know what? What God commands is hard. Let's be honest. It's hard. It's hard to pray for our enemies. It's hard to forgive because we think we're letting people off the hook. I want to remind you, forgiveness is not always engagement. Unless the person has been repentant, you don't re-engage. You may need to have a conversation with them and let them know, hey, this is what, this is what happened, and give them an opportunity to reprove them, make sure that they're aware of the breach in the relationship. Because if you just bail out of a relationship and expect people to know that they hurt you, that may not be the right thing to do. That may not be fair. They may not know that they hurt you. But you're going to have feelings about doing this. And it's not going to do you any good to lift up a superficial prayer that you don't really feel in your heart. Remember that these things need to come from your heart. And so if you're just praying a list of words, but you don't feel this in your heart, then you've done it in vain. What was the point? So you need your inner parent to help you to check in and make sure that what the work that you're doing is authentic. All right. One of the other things that was mentioned here is that as an inner parent, this person feels clueless. And they mentioned that they tend to intellectualize, distract without even knowing it. And that doing away with their inner child is literally their flesh's first instinct. You need to process the feelings of this being done to you. This is the way you were treated when you were growing up, no doubt. And even though your parent probably didn't say it, you knew. You knew that's how they felt. They communicated it. They just didn't say it in their words, maybe. And so this is the way that you have internalized treating yourself. You need to grieve this. In the previous video, one of the things that I mentioned is that you need to go back and you need to be looking at, how was I treated when I was a child? What did I experience with my primary caregivers? How did that feel? You need to grieve it, and you need to gain clarity. And as you're doing that, one of the things that you're going to discover are right now, the things that you don't want in an inner parent, right? You don't want an inner parent that neglects and abandons their child, who wants to literally do away with their child. You don't want that. But as you're grieving and as your inner child is able to tell you, this is how I was feeling, this is what I needed, this is what I was longing for, now you're going to discover what you do want and what you do need, and you're going to learn. You need to be interacting with your inner child. Okay, how can I do this for them? How can I meet them there? Now I'm aware of the things that they do want. You're going to heal. Again, it's God's will that you heal. Ask Him to help you build this repertoire. Each and every one of us has breaches in our relationships with our parents. You know my story, and so you can only imagine what kind of inner parent I had. I was constantly dissociating from myself and only picking myself up when there was something to be gained. Why? Because that is what I was raised with. I was raised with a father who used me and then threw me away when he didn't need me, and then charmed me back in, and then threw me away again, and never fulfilled his promises. How do you think I treated myself? But it's God's will that we heal. And if you do this work, you will heal. But you also have to do it with Him, because you're not your healer. He is. The next thing that they mentioned is, they had talked about anxiety and insecurity. And so the next thing that they mention is, let's say that I'm feeling anxious and my heart is racing. If I ask myself, why am I feeling this way? Did I already lose to Satan by trying to intellectualize? Listen, I make mistakes all the time, and I ask certain things, and then I realize, oh, wait a minute, that's not where I want to go. That's not the right thing to ask my inner child. And then I just correct it. You have lost to Satan if on the last day you haven't fulfilled your covenant. Everything is correctable except for blaspheming the Holy Spirit, speaking evil against the Holy Spirit. Everything else is forgivable. So what I want to say is, I want to point out that this is an attitude towards self. It is an attitude that is coming from likely the way that you were raised. This is an attitude that to me sounds like a hatchet coming down. Like there's no redemption. That didn't come from God. That came from somewhere else. Where is that idea coming from? That's something you need to process. Where is this idea coming from that you've lost to Satan? Satan can't win. As long as you are in correction and repentance, Satan cannot win. You are going to make mistakes. So if you think that you're going to do this perfectly, or if that's the way you're approaching it, you're not in heart and spirit. If you're attempting to do this perfectly, there's another thing for you to process. Where's that coming from? Because God knows you're not going to do it perfectly. And He made a plan for you to correct yourself. So again, take what God has established and bring it into your relationship with your inner child. Because if these are the things that are in your repertoire, this is how you're treating your inner child, it's going to come out in your relationship with God. You're not going to feel like there's any redemption with Him. There's any forgiveness with Him. It has to begin in your personal relationship. Again, this is why we're shepherding according to God and His word. So these are things that your inner parent will be talking with your child about. As your child is starting to express these things, you can correct them with gentleness and love. Sweetheart, this is how God treats us. Witnessing, shepherding. You're witnessing what their process is, what their repertoire is. You're shepherding them into a new repertoire. One that is godly and one that stands in truth. Am I supposed to say, I'm anxious right now. I don't like feeling this way. I hate feeling confused. And then the inner parent says, I'm sorry you feel this way. First of all, don't apologize for the way that your child feels. I know the world teaches you to do it. I hate it. Don't do it. Why are you apologizing for the way your child feels, right? If you think about that, it doesn't even make sense. It's almost a way of like superficially acknowledging that they're feeling bad, but you're not really acknowledging that they're feeling bad. You're implying that something's wrong. You're supposed to trudge this with them. And not only that, but you're feeling it with them. So if you're trudging with someone, if you're alongside of them, what are you going to do? Come here. Let me embrace you. Let me pray with you. You're going to give them comfort. I'm sorry you feel this way is superficial. Do away with it. Don't let it be part of your work. It feels terrible to feel anxious. This is a cognitive response. This is not an emotional response. You're now intellectualizing the feeling. But here I would cut all of that out, and I would skip straight to this. I'm here to help you. Tell me more about what you're feeling. I'm here with you. It's really important that your inner child feels, not hears, because hearing is just superficial, feels that you're here with them, feels that you're trudging with them, that they're not alone. In the previous video, I talked about grounding. I talked about how I take my right hand and I put it over my chest or my shoulder or my heart, and I'll kind of ground, because it's a little awkward to give yourself a hug, but that kind of feels like a hug. It's like I'm here with you. There's a physical sort of representation. I'm right here. Kind of like if someone put their hand on your back and they just sat with you while you cried. Be present. Be truly present with your inner child. Don't be so focused on the things that you're saying. Be focused on that presence, and then the things that need to be said will come. Sometimes just being quiet, like it's hard for us to do. And again, I posted a video today on coffee. If you're accelerated, in your flesh, it's going to be very difficult for you to do this. It's going to be very difficult for you to stay present, because you're going to treat it as a to-do list. Again, remember, you're not doing this with your carnality. You're not doing this with your mind. You're doing this in your heart and in your spirit, and it's going to look very different. Don't try to figure it out. Be present. Come alongside your child. Other questions that are important to ask are, does this remind you of anything? Really, your inner parent it's going to come up for your inner parent. Like, as your inner child is talking, your inner parent is going to start making those connections. But I want you to remind yourself to make those connections between current experiences and past experiences, particularly if it's difficult to resolve the grief. Like, it's not resolving. There's still something nagging. And also, if things are confusing, like you're engaging in behaviors as an adult that make no sense, those behaviors that you're engaging in as an adult are going to make perfect sense when they're put into context. So the context being that you're still working something out from your childhood. If you're just starting this work, 99.9% of the time, there's going to be a childhood component that needs to be processed. So you need to be remembering to ask that question and to process the original event. Now, you're not going back to the original event and acting like you're redoing it. You're talking about it in hindsight. You're also not saying, oh, that must have been really hard, like as though your inner parent wasn't there. Your inner parent wasn't activated yet because you hadn't developed that part of yourself. You were still dependent on your parents, and you were still developing that internal relationship based on the way that you were relating with your parents. Now that you have an internal relationship developed, even if it's a faulty one, now you need to trudge through that between these aspects of yourself, what we're calling the inner child and the inner parent. And so the way that your inner parent, again, should be talking with your child is, of course you feel that way. We went through this, and this, and it makes sense that you would have developed to feel this way or to behave this way when you feel scared. You're coming alongside them. You were there. You feel all the things that they feel. Now you're with them, and they don't have to be alone the way they were back then. But in order for them to feel like they're not alone, you have to be present. You have to be consistent about checking in with them. You can't just do this work and have a breakthrough and then ignore them the rest of the week. You're going to have to be consistent about having a relationship with them, because any relationship that you build and then you go and neglect and abandon them, now you're damaging the relationship. If you have a husband or a wife and you ignore them and then you suddenly pick them up again when you want something from them, how well is that relationship going to go? And particularly with this tender, vulnerable part of you, you're really going to wound yourself if you're ignoring. If you're doing the things that you used to do, jacking yourself up on caffeine and pushing yourself like a machine to perform throughout the day, and then when you hit a wall, then you want to pick the child up and you want to process, they're not going to talk to you. They're going to hide from you. And you're not going to have the repertoire of actually talking. You need to be doing this on a daily basis, not just when there's some sort of crisis. Because when there's that crisis, you won't have the repertoire of relationship. You won't have the repertoire of how to process. And your child's going to hide from you. They're not going to feel that love. They're not going to feel the tenderness from you or the presence or the care. I know it sounds kind of weird, but when you're doing this work, you're going to understand the things that I'm talking about. You're going to understand the phenomenon that I'm talking about. This is truly a relationship. We are not fabricating something here. It may be abstract, but so is you developing an internal voice by having a relationship with your parents. And yet you know that that's the truth. You know where these things came from. We say it as lay people. We say it all the time. We make those connections all the time about why it is that we feel particular ways because when we grew up, these kind of things were happening. That's abstract, and yet you acknowledge it. And this is the same thing. I've explained to you, that's how you develop that internal relationship. Now you need to restructure the relationship according to what is going to be best for you and best for your relationship with God. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.